In December 2023, Bhavish Aggarwal stood on stage and made one of the biggest promises in Indian technology history.
The first application in which our intelligence, the AI models go into is this chat app or a personal assistant app. This is the start of a journey, guys. We are at the beginning point of India's AI revolution.
His company, Krutrim AI, would build India's own AI models, India's own AI assistant, India's own AI cloud, and India's own AI chips. In very simple words, he wanted one Indian company to do what OpenAI, Anthropic, AWS, and Nvidia do all at the same time. And what's weird is that people actually believed him. About 1.5 months later, Krutrim AI raised $50 million at a valuation of $1 billion, and it became India's first AI unicorn. It also became one of the fastest unicorns in India's startup history. Now, just to give you a very quick reality check, this $50 million is apparently less than what OpenAI was burning in a single week at that time. But anyway, about 2 years later now, almost all of these bets made by Krutrim AI are completely gone. The assistant has been shut down, the chip project has been paused, and the foundational model work has also stopped. The only thing that basically remains is a cloud services company. Now see, naturally, when the news of this entire collapse started to come out, every person on the internet had an opinion and an explanation for it. Some people said that India does not have the money for AI. Some other people said India does not have the talent to do all of this. And some people said that Krutrim AI's products were weak and basically all of that stuff. And yes, all of these arguments are true. But you know what? When I went ahead and studied the story a little further, the more I kept doing that, the more I kept coming across a man in the US who took the exact same bet as Bhavish Aggarwal. That man also wanted to build everything on his own, own everything himself, and have all of his businesses connected to each other. My friends, that man is Elon Musk. But you know, the big difference is that Elon Musk actually pulled it off, while our own Bhavish Aggarwal almost entirely failed at this. So then the big question is, how did Elon Musk manage to build the empire that Bhavish Aggarwal kept dreaming to build but could never really build? Why has Elon Musk's empire survived and compounded for more than 2 decades now, while Bhavish Aggarwal's version of it collapsed basically before it could even start? And what exactly did Bhavish Aggarwal miss about the playbook of Elon Musk that he himself was trying to replicate? I want to talk about all of that, hopefully in a good amount of depth and detail in today's video. My name is Anurag Bansal, and let's decode. Now, before we talk about anything else, we'll first need to very importantly understand how Elon Musk actually built all of his companies. And this story, by the way, is very, very different from how it looks on the outside. See, from the outside, it looks like Elon Musk is the fastest entrepreneur alive. He runs a rocket company, a car company, a satellite company, an AI company, and most importantly, he runs all of that together in an interconnected manner. But you know, if you actually look at all of these companies one by one, none of them were built together. They were built one step at a time over more than 2 decades. And my friends, that is the most important part to understand over here. See, Elon Musk started his journey with software in the late 1990s. He first built a company called Zip2 and then he sold it. With that money from Zip2, he built an online payments company which later became PayPal, and then he sold PayPal to eBay in 2002. Now with that deal, Elon Musk made approximately $175 million of personal cash. So remember, before Elon Musk even dared to touch a single rocket with SpaceX or dream about AI, he already had 2 successful companies and real cash in his bank account. And you know, as we go ahead in this video later, you will start to understand why this matters so much in the context of Bhavish Aggarwal's failures. But anyway, coming back to Elon Musk, he then built SpaceX. And even here, with all of the money that he had, he did not really try to do everything about space at once. He picked one single goal, which was to build a rocket that could reach orbit, and that's mostly it. And I don't know if you know this, but even this one single pinpointed goal almost finished Elon Musk at one point.
Well, there's a ton of failures along the way, that's for sure. Like so as I said, for SpaceX, the first 3 launches failed, just barely able to scrape together enough parts and money to do the 4th launch. If that 4th launch had failed, we would have been dead.
So now, if you look at this entire story, even the world's fastest or craziest entrepreneur basically took 6 years of failing to get just one rocket into orbit and more than a decade to become the SpaceX that the world admires today. And that is exactly the kind of nuance that Bhavish Aggarwal entirely missed behind every single layer he wanted to build with Krutrim AI. See, when Elon Musk entered the AI race, even he did not try to build his own AI chips. He bought them from Nvidia. Basically, think about it this way, even the man who is the most famous in the world for building and owning everything himself looked at the chip business and he decided just to not play the game. Now, I want you to remember this important detail because when we later come back to Bhavish Aggarwal, this is exactly where his story will start to break and break very, very badly. Let's take a look at two biggest technology ecosystems in the world today, which are Apple and Google. Now see, today Apple sells its MacBooks with its own Apple-made chips inside. I'm sure you've heard of chips like M1, M2, M3, M4, etc. But you know when Apple did this entire thing for the first time? In 2020. And that too after spending more than a decade making smaller chips for the iPhones and learning that specific game properly. And I'll remind you, Apple was founded way back in 1976. So even a company so old, so big, and with so much money took decades to confidently say, okay, now we will build this crucial piece ourselves. And if you look at the story of Google, that is also very, very similar. Today, all of us talk about Gemini, which is Google's AI. But of course, Gemini did not come out of nowhere. It stood on more than 20 years of Google's search business making money, and that money continuously funding research, data centers, and some of the best AI talent in the world. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but most of the important people that you see and hear in the AI world today, most of them have their links back to Google itself. So do you see a very important common thread here? Whether it is Elon Musk, Apple, Google or anyone else, nobody basically went ahead and announced their entire ecosystem on day one. Every single layer was added only after the previous layer was already working and it was already paying for itself. And our man here tried to do exactly the opposite of all of this and still hoped that it would succeed. Basically, when Bhavish Aggarwal went on stage in December 2023, he had made 4 big promises. First, Indian foundational AI models, which is what companies like OpenAI and Anthropic build today. Second, a consumer AI assistant, which is what a ChatGPT or Claude is today. Third, an Indian cloud system, which is what AWS or Amazon Web Services is. And fourth, Indian AI chips, which is what Nvidia does. Now, I want you to slow down here and really understand what this means in practical life. These are not 4 small products. These are entirely different companies. Each of them requires their own kind of talent, their own kind of technology, and most importantly, their own insane amount of money. And you know what's the funniest part in all of this? Our man Bhavish Aggarwal announced this massively grand plan with just $50 million in funding. And like I said earlier, OpenAI was burning $50 million per week at that point to build what they've actually built today. And I'll remind you, OpenAI was just doing 1 out of the 4 jobs here. So if you think about it, the real question is not why Krutrim failed. The real question is how on earth was this ever supposed to work in the first place? But you know what? Bhavish Aggarwal very interestingly did have a plan for exactly this problem. All of his 4 businesses, which is the foundational models, the consumer AI assistant, the AI cloud and the chips, were all supposed to feed into each other and fund each other. Basically think about it this way, a good assistant requires a good model requires a good cloud requires good paying consumers, and good paying consumers basically require good quality products, which once again requires a great assistant. So if you look at it that way, Bhavish Aggarwal was basically building an entire flywheel where every business was funding the other business and they were all basically growing together. But you know what happened? That same grand plan also is exactly what ended up killing the entire ecosystem. I'll tell you how. See, on paper, this flywheel sounds absolutely brilliant. That is exactly the kind of story that investors love hearing on a pitch deck. But the thing is, the moment you run this exact same flywheel in reverse, the problem starts showing up. See, for the assistant to be good, the model has to be good first. For the model to get trained in a good manner, it needs massive ready cloud first. And for a cloud like that to even get built, it needs serious money first. Now you only tell me, based on the flywheel that we just saw, where was all of this money supposed to come from? From the success of the other layers in the flywheel, right? In Bhavish Aggarwal's massively grand plan, every layer was waiting for some other layer to succeed first. And every single one of these layers, if you remember, was brand new and it was all unproven. And remember, this chain existed only because he wanted to own everything himself. Because the moment you buy even one piece from outside, this entire chain breaks and the risk starts to drop. But in Krutrim AI's plan, everything was tied to everything, so what basically looks like a flywheel which is good on paper was actually a very, very bad deadlock in reality. Because even if one layer would crack, nothing else was holding the rest and the whole structure would start falling together. And that is why if you look at most of the big AI companies today, none of them try to do everything alone. OpenAI, for example, rents its computing power from Microsoft and other cloud companies instead of building everything itself right now. Similarly, Anthropic runs on Amazon's and Google's clouds. And like we saw earlier, even Elon Musk's XAI buys chips from Nvidia. Now these, mind you, are companies with hundreds of times more money than Krutrim AI, and even they know that some things are basically just better left to people who have spent years mastering them and figuring out what works. And by the way, this basically applies to people like you and me even more than it applies to companies. If you take your own money as an example, most of us pick our mutual funds ourselves, usually based on a friend's tip or based on some information that we saw online. Why? Because actually checking a fund properly is hard work. To really know whether your fund is doing well, you would need to compare it against similar funds, track how it has behaved over many years, and you would also have to figure out whether it fell because the whole market fell or because the fund itself is weak. And if we be real, if you are like most people, you do not really have the time or the professional skill set to do this properly. So most of us end up doing the most natural thing, which is nothing. And that is a problem because weak funds keep sitting on our portfolios for years and keep dragging our returns down without us even realizing it properly. That is exactly a gap that our partner for today, Powerup Money, fills. It is a SEBI registered investment advisory app that does the entire checking job for you. You basically connect your mutual fund portfolio and within about a minute, it tells you in very simple words which of your funds are doing well and which ones need a rethink. After that, they review and rate funds across categories every month. And if you happen to have out-of-form funds in your portfolio, they also help you switch to in-form mutual funds. And since Powerup Money does not really earn any commissions from the fund companies, their advice is completely unbiased and purely based on data and insights. And you know the best part? This portfolio review thing that I'm talking about is absolutely free. So if you invest in mutual funds, I would really recommend you check it out at least once. I'm attaching a link in the description, in the pinned comment, or you can basically scan this QR code. Anyway, now coming back to Krutrim AI, we were talking about how this entire flywheel was actually a deadlock in reality, where one single crack in even one layer could bring the entire structure down. And you know, unfortunately for Bhavish Aggarwal, that particular crack showed up in just a few months, and that too in the most public way possible. In February 2024, Krutrim AI launched a chatbot to the public, and almost immediately, users started posting screenshots of how the chatbot claimed that it was created by OpenAI. Krutrim, of course, defended and they said that this happened because of a data leak in training, but of course, by then the damage was basically done. Basically, if you look at it a little differently, the very first product of India's AI unicorn had embarrassed itself on the global stage on day one. And at least the way I see it, this is where the deadlock actually did its real big damage. That one big public embarrassment meant no serious users meant no real proof, and with no proof anywhere in the entire space, investors simply stop writing checks for them. In fact, as per reports, after the first $50 million round, Krutrim AI never really managed to raise meaningful money from outside investors again. Whatever funding announcements came in later was largely Bhavish Aggarwal putting his own money into the company. And basically, without any new money, everything else started to unwind on its own. Senior leaders left, there were layoffs, the assistant was shut down, the chip project was paused, and the foundational model work was also stopped. And in just about 2 years, the entire grand empire announced by Bhavish Aggarwal was reduced to just one surviving business, which was the cloud. Now look, at this point, most people would just call Bhavish Aggarwal foolish and run away. But I'll tell you what, honestly, there is a much bigger problem here, and that was never just about him. You remember how I told you about how Elon Musk had real cash in his bank account before even touching rockets, and that would really matter to him later? See, when SpaceX kept failing, to a great extent, it was Elon Musk's own money which kept the company alive. And here's the thing, the moment this personal money started running out, the American ecosystem stepped in. NASA gave contracts, and even American investors who had seen such long and painful technology journeys before kept backing him for the next decade or two. And that is what the American ecosystem gives its founders. Money that is ready to wait for years just for the chance for that one big idea that eventually works. To give you another great example, Tesla's investors waited approximately 17 years before the company saw its first fully profitable year. Now I know some of you might say Bhavish Aggarwal also had money, and yes, you would be right. In fact, as per reports, he committed thousands of crores of rupees of his own wealth into Krutrim AI. But look at the difference over here. Elon Musk's money was real cash from companies that he had already sold, and Bhavish Aggarwal's wealth was mostly shares of Ola and Ola Electric, which were companies that were still fighting their own battles and sort of struggling. And even more importantly, when his personal money was not enough, there was no real NASA and no real patient investor waiting to step in for him. In fact, as per some reports, he even had to pledge his own Ola Electric shares just to borrow money for Krutrim AI. Sadly, that is the honest state of India's startup money today. Our venture capital money has learned to support delivery apps like quick commerce, fintech, etc., which is great, but these are all businesses that start showing results within a few years. But here's the reality: almost nobody wants to fund a business in India that needs 10 to 20 years of pure losses before anything works. In fact, even Sarvam AI, which is India's only other big bet in AI, had to depend on the government for subsidized computing power because private money with that kind of patience just does not exist here. So if you look at all of this rationally, in Elon Musk's world, failing publicly is treated as part of the process. But in Bhavish Aggarwal's world, one big public failure ended the entire process. And that is a big reason why India has just not been able to produce its own Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos so far. It was never really about the talent. In fact, I'm sure we all know of cases where our own country's talent has gone to the US and is leading some of the topmost companies there. It is more about our startup ecosystem's money willing to wait for success. But either way, if you practically look at Bhavish Aggarwal versus Elon Musk, what Bhavish Aggarwal basically did is that he tried to copy everything that was visible about Elon Musk, which is the speed, the ambition, and the ownership. But what he could not copy was everything that was sitting beneath that, which was 20 years of step-by-step proof and all the money that was ready to wait for all of that proof. And that, my friends, I think is one of the biggest lessons here. Empires can be announced in one single speech, but they can largely be built only in one way, which is one proven layer at a time. Now here's a question for you. If you had 500 crore rupees of spare money in your bank account right now, would you rather spend it on backing a business that would never show you profits for the next 20 years, but when it does, it'll show you a very big profit? Or would you rather back a company that will probably show you profit sooner, but a relatively smaller amount? Be really honest with me and let me know in the comments, because I would love to have a chat with you on it. Anyway, that's it from my side. If you liked it, please consider liking and subscribing because it does help my channel. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.